Thank you for taking the time to speak with Truth Out. Bruce Jessen has been described as the architect of the CIA's torture program, the enhanced interrogation program. And you had some connection with Dr. Bruce Jessen. Can you tell us a bit about that?
From 1989 to 1990, I was assigned at Fairchild Air Force Base, which is the home of the Air Force's Survival School. And Dr. Bruce Jessen was there as the chief of psychology at the schoolhouse.
We've been told that SEER tactics have been reverse engineered in use against detainees. Can you give us some background on SEER and what it exactly is?
Our program was resistance to interrogation specifically. SEER, which stands for Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, is something that we train our own troops in to understand illegal torture.
Right.
So in fact, what we did in resistance to interrogation was something that was first done with the consent of the persons that were going through the training. Secondly, the psychologists were there to act in roles of control rods, so that if someone actually was having a difficulty, some kind of psychological breakdown, that then we could stop, do a timeout, and actually bring in the psychologist so they could talk people through, so that we would be able to actually educate people to resist interrogation more and more, and not to allow themselves to be exploited.
You've come across Bruce Jessen's handwritten notes that were in your possession. Can you tell us a bit about these notes?
The notes that I found that were written by Bruce Jessen were actually used for a 1-hour block of instruction called Psychological Aspects to Detention. And so that was a part of a larger course, and that course was specifically tailor-made for special mission units at JSOC.
When you read these handwritten notes written by Bruce Jessen, what were you thinking at that point? What was in the notes themselves that stood out for you, if anything?
Well, it's that ultimate struggle that one would have being held by captors that are trying to exploit you, and you're trying to resist their exploitation that you know would be disloyal to your country. That's what we were doing in resistance to interrogation training. It was for the benefit of our own forces. For me to look at the notes that were handwritten by a psychologist that were then taken to intentionally hurt and harm people, that's what was just beyond my comprehension. To actually be doing torture as a means of interrogation just doesn't wash, because we were trained in interrogation school that certainly there's no good that comes out of pushing someone beyond a certain level. And that's what the handwritten notes of Bruce Jessen really show, is that when you push someone psychologically beyond a certain level, when you actually engage in physical torture, then what you get from the person is really worthless.
So would it be safe to say that Bruce Jessen knew that the tactics, techniques that he personally had been subjecting detainees to, at least 3 high-value detainees to, simply did not work?
That's my belief. He absolutely knew that torture does not work.
The Senate Armed Services Committee conducted an investigation into the treatment of detainees in the custody of the Department of Defense. And they also looked at the SEER program. It's my understanding that you contacted the Senate Armed Services Committee when you found out that they were conducting this investigation, and to give them some information about Bruce Jessen. Can you talk about that?
Well, I was certainly interested when Senator Levin had the committee, and I sent him an email just to say that if you're interested in what was going on in the beginnings of the Special Survival Training Program, I was available, was willing to talk to his staffers, and they did show an interest. I got an email back. We played email tag for a bit, made some phone calls to Senator Levin's office and never heard back from them. And then I sent a final email to them about 6 months later saying that I was available anytime that they wanted to talk to me, but I never heard from them again.
Why did you choose to come forward to discuss this?
When I saw that Bruce Jessen, Mitchell, and Aldrich were all working together to actually create the Bush-Cheney torture program, it made me physically ill. To see resistance training, which was educating our own troops to survive hostile detention, for that to be changed into something that was just horrific. The issues in America actually becoming tyrannical and creating a tyranny against others was against what I thought I pledged allegiance for as an officer.
Have you spoken to any of your other colleagues, anyone that you trained with in the SEER program, who shares this these same feelings that you have?
To a person. Everyone that I've talked to that's been in SEER, been trained with SEER, especially the resistance to interrogation block. Those people just can't believe that that's been turned around, stood up on its head, and become a problem for national security.
Why haven't those people been vocal about it?
Well, we're talking about the incompetence of the president, the commander-in-chief, during a time of war. We're still at war. To be vocal against the commander-in-chief during a time of war could be a chargeable offense.
But do they need to be vocal against the commander-in-chief, or how about vocal against the policy?
I think it was just un-American. Most people feel it's un-American to talk badly about the policies and procedures that are in place during war.
When you were training in the SEER program, what sort of tactics or what sort of techniques were you subjected to, were the students subjected to? We now know that Bruce Jessen and James Mitchell personally waterboarded some of the high-value detainees.
And I don't know why they were doing that, because we never did waterboarding at the Special Survival Training Program. The Navy had waterboarding at North Island in California. But unfortunately, waterboarding, and we've had this discussion numerous times between Mitchell, Jessen, and myself, talking about waterboarding, why the Navy even did waterboarding escaped us, because psychologically it's something that you don't want to take a person to. You don't want to take a person to that point where they feel like they've failed. Because we were educators. We weren't interrogators.
We've been talking about this in somewhat clinical terms, and the brutality, we haven't really discussed that. I'm wondering if there's anything here that could have been an experiment. We know from several reports, my reporting included, that the CIA's program had experimental qualities to it. I have reported that data was being kept on one high-value detainee, and based on that data, they were tweaking the particular technique, sleep deprivation. From what you've read and your own insight into the SEER program itself, does anything ring to you as an experiment?
Well, why would you have a doctor of psychology? Why would you have a doctor of psychology waterboarding someone 83 or 183 times? What I've read is that they were getting it down to a fine science of waterboarding, which is known to be torture. So what we're really talking about is an administration, our executive branch, our president and vice president, and those that were ones who were supposed to protect our country and due diligence, were actually experimenting with torture.
And what do you think should happen? We have not seen any accountability whatsoever since the program itself has been revealed, and since the individual players, key players, have been named. What do you think should happen to people like Bruce Jessen, Roger Aldrich, and James Mitchell?
Well, certainly you used the word accountability. I think we should know what it was that they were involved with when, and what the decisions were to rush hastily towards doing torture. We need to understand what went wrong and when it went wrong, and to hold those accountable that actually lied, because torture doesn't work, and we actually are creating a bigger problem than we probably understand.